Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Newsroom. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. But today is the 15th of February 2023, and these are the stories that we will be discussing under the ambit of the newsroom. We'll begin with the second day of the raids on the BBC offices in New Delhi and Mumbai in India by the tax officers, apparently because there has been some evidence of tax exemption or tax corruption by the BBC offices. They say that they are investigating the BBC for tax evasion, diversion of profits, non-compliance of Indian law. Is there any truth to it, or is it just because there was a documentary that came out under the ambit of the BBC that criticized with facts and figures Modi's role in the 2002 Gujarat riots and also his post-2019 professional behavior? Now, this is a huge question mark as far as the human rights and the press freedom across the world is concerned for a country that considers itself to be the world's largest democracy and a pluralistic country. This is going to be our first story. Our second story of the day concerns the updates as far as the earthquake that rocked and shook Syria and Turkey is concerned. The latest casualties as we speak have crossed 41,000, with the maximum of casualties emanating from Turkey and around 5,000 from Syria. This said, the relief and rescue efforts, as far as the Syrians are saying, are not enough for their people who have already borne the brunt of a civil war since the last 12 years. How is the world reacting to it? This is going to be our second story. And then we are going to talk about Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, ladies and gentlemen, where a complete shutdown is being observed today against the brutal policies of the fascist government of the BJP. This call for the strike has been given by the All Parties Hurriyat Conference. Finally, we'll be talking about 4 people who have been confirmed dead and thousands who have been displaced in New Zealand after Cyclone Gabriel brought widespread flooding and landslides to the northern part of the country. Thousands have also been displaced. This is going to be our last story. Let's begin with our first. And we see there's a lot of damage to the people and to the world over because of different incidents, whether it be floods, whether it be earthquakes. Let's begin with our first segment, but that concerns press freedom or the lack thereof in India because of the raid that has happened on the BBC India offices in Mumbai and New Delhi. More in the following report.
BJP government is suppressing free speech and abusing the emergency blocking provision of the country's controversial Information Technology Rules 2021 to intimidate news organizations. Indian tax authorities have raided the offices of the British Broadcasting Corporation in the wake of a documentary that examined Prime Minister Modi's role in 2002 anti-Muslim riots. The employees' laptops and mobile phones were seized. Those in the offices at the time of the raid were not allowed to leave, and employees scheduled for night shifts were told not to come in pending further advice. The raids come weeks after Modi's government banned the documentary titled India, the Modi Question, that probed his role in 2002 Muslim genocide in the state of Gujarat, where he was chief minister at the time. The BBC has stood by its reporting in the programme, saying it was rigorously researched according to the highest editorial standards and contained a wide array of voices and perspectives. The Editors Guild of India, which calls itself a non-partisan association of editorial leaders, said it was deeply concerned by the visits by the tax officers. Last month, the Committee to Protect Journalists said that ordering social media platforms to block the documentary constitutes an attack on the free press that flagrantly contradicts the country's stated commitment to democratic ideals. The IT raid at BBC's offices reeks of desperation and shows that the Modi government is scared of criticism.
Dr. Farah Naz, who's a foreign affairs expert, joins us online. Dr. Farah, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Farah, it's the second day of the raids on the BBC offices in New Delhi and Mumbai. Did this come as a surprise to you? This is what I asked my guest yesterday also, and it came as no surprise to him. But he said that this is a huge media outlet, but the accusations that have been put on the BBC that include tax evasion, diversion of profits and non-compliance of Indian law. Do you feel an organization such as the BBC, as big as the BBC, can undergo such kind of corruption or corrupt practices?
This is not a surprise to me. We can expect anything from the Modi government and his people and his supporters. But to me, it is a surprise in one way that how and why the BBC and the United Kingdom, they let it happen at first place, and why there was not a reaction coming up on what India is doing to all these international organizations, media outlets who have the right to say and do whatever they want to under the umbrella of the freedom of speech. So this kinds of questions all those organizations who are now sitting there in India and functioning in India. They either have to function according to the RSS agenda, or if they don't follow the RSS agenda, they will be bullied like the way the BBC is bullied in India. So this is really serious, and I think all those prominent organizations and countries, they have to take a firm stance on the way the BBC as a channel has been bullied there over the the issue of the probably there is some tax issue, and the reports are coming up through all the Western media sources that there was nothing as such that the BBC and its people should be bullied for the non-payment of the taxes and all. It was all about the BBC documentary that everybody is certain of, that this is why they were bullied.
All right. Now, Dr. Farah, there's another thing as well. The government's allegations on top of that, as far as this documentary is concerned, I'd like to quote what the government spokesperson in India said, that this documentary is a propaganda piece designed to push a particular discredited narrative, and the bias, the lack of objectivity and a continuing colonial mindset is blatantly visible in this documentary. Is it?
I don't think so. It is not something acceptable to the current Modi government, because it is telling exactly what happened in Gujarat at that time. And if you just come up with another form of or another version of the documentary, which says that according to the 2013 Indian court's justifications, when they said that the Modi government or Nuri had nothing to do with that butchery in Gujarat, then everything is acceptable. But who is going to accept it, where at that time, whatever happened, everyone witnessed it? And from everyone, I mean to say the international community. No one has forgotten. I think we do have some memory problems, but we don't have this much short-term memory problems that we forget such a big incident. And whatever BBC has documented, it was all based on factual figures. So if something facts that all these international media organizations cannot portray and share with the world, I think this questions where is the international organization standing, and the power of international organizations and media, where nobody has the right to say and share what is right or what is wrong. And then
before Dr. Farah, before we go to the international response, I'd like to also add something that the BJP spokesperson said. He called the BBC the most corrupt organization in the world. Isn't this an example of the pot calling the kettle black?
I think so. This is a very clear example that today BBC is one of the corrupt media outlet, and but like back in time, BBC was the one who was always projecting and promoting, India through one way or the other. So at that time, BBC was the most authentic source of information. And whenever you have to find and double check the information, you always go to all these Western sources. So it depends on your priorities. It depends on what actually is happening. At this time, BBC is acting as a monster for India and the Modi government, which is really not acceptable to the Modi people. So that's why they are projecting BBC as something which is not acceptable to the Indian government, which is really not acceptable.
All right, when the documentary was released, we've discussed that in the past as well. Special emergency laws were enforced in India so that the documentary cannot be viewed on social media platforms such as YouTube or Twitter. And of course, both these social media platforms complied. But then some university students showed it in their university. They were arrested as well. There is a certain draconian mindset that has entered the Indian politics since 2014, and it is continuing to gain ground. Is there going to be any stop to this form of brutality, whether it comes in the form of press freedom or denial of press freedom or human rights abuse?
I think the only stop or hindrance or deterrence can come when everyone say whatever India is doing is wrong. And when Pakistan say it, they always claim that Pakistan and India are never friends. So that's why Pakistani people and Pakistani analysts are talking about it. But now through the BBC incident and event, I think the world has seen the real picture of India, that where India is standing. And anything and anyone, irrespective of those who are the best friends of India or the worst friends of India, if they say anything against that is against the RSS agenda, India and its government, they will come forward and they will bully them to another extent. And whatever happened to all those students who were trying to see what is happening there in the documentary, the way they were tortured and they were really, scared. I think this is not acceptable. And this is not the first time, Umar. It has been happening in the past, and I believe it will continue in the future as well, unless and until there is some sort of sanctions imposed on India that you have no right to affect the freedom of speech and the right to say whatever one wants to. I think, of course, everyone has to follow certain rules and regulations, and within those rules and regulations, there should be certain liberty provided to people. We agree on those terms, but
Well,
at
rules
least
and regulation,
here,
liberty, or the lack thereof, Dr. Farah, these are statements that come so true and so, they ring true to the ears, but in fact, they are never applied in principle when it comes to India. And you talked about the international response, which has been quite muted, apart from maybe the Editors Guild of India that talks about it, the Mumbai Trust of India that talks about it, other bodies, the Congress talks about it, but generally, the important bodies across the world have had a very muted response to that. To which extent will the world go and highlight, in order to appease India because of its economic relations that it enjoys with India, on the pretext of, and put aside all the kinds of abuse that have been going on in India and continue to go on in India?
the world powerful countries in romance with India, I think they will lose a lot more. And it's not only BBC who is getting targeted. I think next targets will be many more firms and institutes and media sources. And even I would say all those multinational corporations who are working in India, they will be really, shaken up that they have to work per the RSS working lines. Otherwise, they will be bullied the same way media, like the BBC, the way BBC is tortured and bullied. So the world response is muted because for their own interest, but that interest is going to pay them a huge price in the future. So better they wake up now, or it is too late for them to realize what India is doing to its people and what India is doing to the world. We have seen it the way they are affecting life through their strong engagement of their diaspora in various countries. They have to stop it. There were some sort of skirmishes in Melbourne, and we have seen it the way things are working in the US as well. So better stop it now and tell Modi regime that please you need to behave a little bit and work and act within the fundamental rights and liberty which are given to the people through the various constitutional arrangements and through the international arrangement as well. It is really need of the time. Otherwise, nothing can stop India.
All right, Dr. Farah, also, whether it be deliberate non-compliance with transfer pricing rules, vast diversion of profits, and manipulation of prices for unauthorized benefits, including tax advantages, which, of course, the income tax officers say the BBC is indulging in. It brings to light many such incidents that have happened in the past. I remember the son of a very, very popular Indian film star who was also put into jail because at that time that star was not complying with certain quote unquote rules and regulations. Is this the new tactic by the BJP government? If you do not comply with what we want, we are going to pursue you one way or the other.
They can do anything they want to. And Aryan Khan's case that you are referring to, it is not the first one. It happened to many other actors as well. And we have also seen when Mahira Khan's made a video in a movie in India, that movie was banned. And then she was she was not even allowed to finish the recording of the movie in India. And they had to shift the recordings to a third country. So it's quite a shame for India, which is a very diverse society where there are several, groups prevailing there. There are several languages spoken there. And it is one of the largest country with largest number of minorities living there. So it has to bring some sort of tolerance. It has to bring some sort of, flexibility into its rules and regulations. And the new tactics and tools that you are referring to, taxes is one of the new ways, new mechanism of how to bully people. I think this is really shameful. And even through the BBC one, the reports are coming up that there is no such evidence found. So later on, through even the Aryan's case, there was no certain evidence found there. So various reports, whatever they're doing, then later on they say we have not done anything as such. The way they are moving back from the Gujarat incident, in the future they will say, no, we never did this, we never attacked the BBC, we never, affected their life there. They can move on, and even the courts are in support of the Modi government. So you can't do anything about India unless and until the international institutions, international groups, they can kind of bring pressure on India that please behave, otherwise it's going to create a problem for their best friend who are, there in the world who support and stand with India, and give them all opportunities that any other country who deserves are deprived of. So they have to, for their own larger benefits, they have to bring their partner India into equal terms and ask them to work according to the international set norms and regulations. Otherwise it will be a problem for them to defend India in the future.
Dr. Farah Naz, I'd also refer to some other newspapers who've criticized the Indian government's action. An editorial in the Indian Express newspaper says the government's action smacks of bullying, quote unquote. The Mumbai Press Club says we demand that this intimidation be stopped and journalists left to do their jobs without fear or favor. Press freedom in India, or the lack thereof, has been gaining momentum since the last couple of years. Do you feel this is going to gain momentum with time as well, and there's no stopping the BJP doing whatever it wants, or will there be a red line sometime somewhere?
I don't see any red lines coming up, because whatever India is doing, I think worst of the worst, somehow the Western countries, they are kind of providing them all the benefits. So India is not scared of anyone, because that side is on India's favor. So speaking of the media, the way the media sources report, the way they tortured BBC, I think their local media sources are also now afraid of, if they can do to BBC, what will be their position, what India and Modi government has, the potential to do with them if they go by any chance against the will or agenda of the RSS. So it's a message, a signal given to each one of them who are there as a local media sources or international media sources, because everyone believes whenever we have to check for the authenticity of the information, we are always told, go and check on the BBC. And if the BBC is saying, yes, this is authentic and correct. So this is where, reliability of the information is questioned in India, where nobody can count on that whether whatever BBC is telling can be trusted on or not, because this will really, affect the future of the media and the way information and the way the journalists are going into the fields and collecting information and then reporting. If their reports are something that are against India, or the way the Indian system is working, they will be reluctant, to get it published. So the future of media, the future of journalism is questioned here, and the international community have to come forward to securitize the journalism sector, because this will really, really affect the future. And media, I think it is one of the biggest source for us to get the information. We cannot let it happen to BBC the way it has been happening in India.
All right, now let's talk of the internet laws also that have been put into place by the government in order to suppress press freedom. As far as the Reporters Without Borders report goes, India has fallen 8 places to 150 out of 180 countries in the 2022 Press Freedom Index. Also, I'd like to understand that most media watchdogs have criticized the Modi government for this internet law that puts digital platforms, including Twitter and Facebook, under direct government oversight. And then of course these tax searches, for example, that which is happening to BBC. Today it's the BBC, tomorrow, as you said, it could be any other organizations that tries to criticize the BJP or its government or its tactics with facts and figures. Do you also feel, Dr. Farah, that the fact remains that the 2-part documentary has also irked the BJP and its followers and the government much more, because the first part talks about the 2002 Gujarat riot, but the second part talks about Modi's governance post 2019. Do you feel that is also why so many facts and figures have been laid bare by the BBC, and that irks the BJP and the government and its workers even more, because the BBC has more or less come full circle as far as what the BJP and Modi government are up to?
It's a very tricky question, Omar, because the first part and the second part, one is about the history, and the second part is about the current system. So, the historical facts, I simply don't understand what the Modi regime is afraid of, that they are not accepting what they have done back in time in Gujarat, and where the world is aware of what happened and how it happened. Now, speaking of the current system, whatever is happening in India, it's not only people outside Indian borders, but people within the Indian borders. They are every now and then trying to speak up, but their voices are really, really getting, muted, one way or the other. This speaks about the governance mechanism of the pressure tactics, the way if even the Students' Federation, they come out, the students, they wanted to say something that is anti Modi government, their voices are muted. Nobody has the right to speak for their own self. Nobody has the right to tell what they think about the current system. All what they can say and do is the set agenda that is provided to them. So it's like a uniform system. If you remain in the uniformity, you can sustain and survive there. Otherwise, you have no room. Either you just face death, or you will be bullied, or you will be picked up, or your passport or your citizenship will be ripped off you. So all this suggests that this documentary is very, very serious to the Modi government, and they do not want people to kind of see this documentary from the lens of, how they have been doing and why they've been doing.
Exactly, and it puts them in bad light, quote unquote, with facts and figures that have been put forward as per the different organizations and the people who were there during the 2002 Gujarat riots as well. But it also lays bare the facts and figures post 2019 under the Modi government. Thank you so very much, Dr. Farah Naz, a foreign affairs expert, to have joined us, to have talked to us about the BBC India raids by the income tax officers that is still going on. This is the second day of those raids, and of course the phones have been confiscated, the documents are being copied, the desktops are being confiscated as well, all under the pretext of tax evasion. We'll see what the Indian government comes up in the coming days as far as the allegations on the BBC are concerned. We have to go to a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Our second segment pertains to the updates as far as the earthquake that rattled Turkey and Syria is concerned. Although the number of casualties has now topped 41,000, with the maximum casualties of 35,000 plus in Turkey and around 5,800 plus casualties in Syria, the fact remains that aid is coming to both the countries. Nevertheless, a lot of people in Syria are complaining that aid is not reaching the way it should for their people. More in the following report.
It has been a week since a massive earthquake instantly changed tens of thousands of Turkish and Syrian lives. A 7.8 magnitude quake erased thousands of buildings across 10 Turkish cities, devastating entire villages across the border in northern Syria as well. Rescuers have continued to pull out more survivors from the rubble in Turkey and Syria as the death toll from last week's earthquakes topped 40,000. More than 8,000 people have been pulled out alive from the rubble in Turkey. The UN estimates up to 5.3 million people in Syria may be homeless after the earthquakes. Nearly 900,000 people are in urgent need of hot food in Turkey and Syria. Turkish authorities say 35,418 people have been killed in the country, while more than 5,800 people are dead in Syria, according to the UN and the Syrian government. UN Children's Agency UNICEF stated that more than 7 million children have been affected by the massive earthquake, voicing fear that many thousands more had died. The World Health Organization describes the earthquakes in Turkey as the worst natural disaster in a century in what it characterizes as its Europe region. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan vowed to press on with the rescue and recovery efforts as the search for survivors is about to end in the northwestern Syria, said the head of the White Helmets.
We discuss Syria, Turkey and the aftermath of the earthquake, including relief and rehabilitation. We've been joined by Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan, former ambassador and foreign affairs analyst. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. It's a pleasure to always have you on board for our show. We'll begin with the question marks that are emanating as far as Syria is concerned. Even Antonio Guterres says that aid workers should be allowed to operate freely in Syria, a country that has been racked by 12 years of civil war. how can aid properly reach when there are already other issues, whether it be political or otherwise, concerning Syria? Do you feel that countries can overturn the current sanctions that are on Syria in order for aid to arrive in proper quantity?
Well, countries cannot really violate the sanctions which has already been imposed by the Security Council, but the countries can, in fact, violate the bilateral sanctions, which are also in place by the U.S. But my understanding is that coming few days, it should have happened earlier, but now coming few days, 1 or 2 days time, the sanctions, so far as the humanitarian work and humanitarian goods and humanitarian relief is concerned, that should be lifted, and that, in my analysis, it's going to be lifted. Now, there are 4 million refugees of Syrians. They are also impacted by this earthquake. So that's the worst part. And as your report, the documentary, it indicated about 23 million people altogether affected and impacted. So this is obviously the worst in century, and very rightly said by the WHO. And we've seen it. We've seen this devastation in the time immemorial, last 100 years. Yes, Pakistan had witnessed it in 2005. That was 7.6 magnitude. But in Turkey, it's 7.8 magnitude. And later on, obviously, they would make a survey and find out all the damages which has happened and why it has happened. We and the world would also learn lessons from such a fault line on which Turkey is located. It's on the fault line. There are two fault lines are passing through the Turkey, but that is probably out of the context of your today's topic. And there could be even more at the later stages. They already had some aftershocks.
With the hundreds of aftershocks, Dr. Jamil, that
Yeah.
both the countries have witnessed after this earthquake,
Right.
and you talked about the 7.8 magnitude earthquake. There was another 7.6 that followed as well, and then other are the aftershocks that really crippled, the people who are living in these earthquake-prone areas. And then to top it all, there was some the buildings that were not properly constructed as per the regulations. A lot of people have been complaining of that as well, and I hope now that the relief and the rehabilitation work has started, and the reconstruction phase, whenever it will start, that the buildings will also be constructed as per the modalities, so that they are not affected the next time. I hope not, whenever an earthquake strikes the area. You talked about the Syrians who are in Turkey, and you talked about those who are placed as refugees there. Though these people have been allowed to go to Syria temporarily, and they can stay for a couple of time, but they have to not exceed their stay beyond 3 months, if I'm not wrong. From going to one quake affected area to the other quake affected area, just to see if their families are fine or not, is this a human tragedy that has exceeded expectations of other human tragedies, in your point of view, in this century?
Yeah, indeed, it's a huge and humongous human tragedy which the history is witnessing, which this territory is witnessing. There's no denials of that fact. And that's what I was indicating these Turkey and Syria, the fault line of the Anatolian plate, they are located. The aftershocks, as I was mentioning, and then you further elaborated it and illustrated it. So there could be many more at the future stages, but that's a future planning. Now, what is to be done and what's being done now, I think that's the main concern of ours. The Turkish government has already announced that they would examine the whole thing. They will inquire about the whole thing, the builders, the drawing, the design, the why. There were certain buildings, the lesson learned there was that certain buildings, they were earthquake-proof buildings, but then they could not sustain the earthquake. That means the builders did not really have those factors which were required to be. And that's a lesson learned. That lesson learned is being witnessed by the entire world, and the entire world have to really bring it into their factor, bring into their consideration once they undertake any constructions in future, including Pakistan, because we are also on the fault line, and there such things can happen in any country.
How can we forget the 2005 earthquake, Dr. Jamil?
Very true. And imagine that 2005, the Turkish, they were the first to arrive here, and there were in 2005 they sent 3 aircraft straight away with the medical teams. They sent relief package of 150 million straight away. Financial assistance to Pakistan straight away about $100 million, and relief goods worth about $50 million.
But Dr. Saab, so has Pakistan this time as I mean, I wouldn't call this as a reaction to what Turkey did, but because of our close ties, it has sent another 6.7 tons of relief goods in addition to the 150 tons plus relief goods that have already arrived in Turkey, plus all the teams that have gone to the different areas, plus also the goods that have arrived in Syria from the Pakistani side. I'd like to also understand, being a diplomat, how calamities such as these bring certain countries together that haven't been on close terms in the past. I'd like to talk about the Turkish-Armenian rapprochement that has happened as Turkey's Foreign Minister Mehmet Cavusoglu has praised Armenia's aid as in the earthquake response. Then there is a Jordanian Foreign Minister who was in Turkey, so was the Malaysian Prime Minister. Do you feel calamities like these bring countries together?
Well, they have started bringing it already. If you would see the list of the countries who have already sent the relief teams and the relief goods, there are 105 countries. They have already reached there in some shape or the other. There are about 16 international organizations. They are operating at the moment in Turkey. So yes, including those countries who did not have bilateral relations or who had the conflict, but still they have sent it. So they definitely such calamity. They cut across the border of any conflict, or in most cases in any conflict or any misunderstanding between the communities and countries. So that is what we are now witnessing in Turkey also. Where we are witnessing more than 105 countries, including those countries who had some kind of differences with Turkey. So that is one aspect. But then we should also not forget that Pakistan stands out in terms of their relief work, not in terms of quantum, not in terms of the number, in terms of the emotions. See the emotions of our people, those who are rendering particularly the armed forces team which has gone there, with what emotion it has been registered, and it is being recognized that with what emotions are they really trying. They brought the relief, and they rescued and the injured people from the rubbles of the buildings. So that is where the significance of our team is, and that's where the significance of Pakistan is. And Pakistan during the Iran-India time, this part of the region of Pakistan, people from here had gone and participated in the war there between 1999 and 1923. That was a Turkish national movement. And Turkish people still remember it very vividly, the way people of this part of the world, which is now Pakistan, had gone and helped them out. People had the female folk of this region, they had really even thrown their jewelry, and they had contributed towards Turkey at that time. Turkey was the Osmania regime. So and that feelings you find it all over.
Of course, that is true. But you talk of emotions, Dr. Jamil. When you look at cases of a woman, a 42-year-old woman who was pulled out of the rubble after 222 hours, then another 77-year-old woman who has been taken out of the rubble after 212 hours, 9 people rescued from the rubble in Turkey, including 2 brothers aged 17 and 21, who managed to survive on protein powder and drinking each other's urine. I mean, examples such as these are very heartening, but at the same time are an example of humanity coming together. And we've also seen videos of the Pakistani teams helping out these children and the adults coming out of the rubble. And does that also bring to light the use of humanity in times such as these, and the importance of human touch, human contact, and human endeavors in times such as these?
No, that's what being demonstrated, and that's what being witnessed there at the moment in Turkey. And about the human instinct to survive, which you have already indicated, that is also one of those really landmark, one of those things which history can never forget. That how people, they survived there, and how their instinct of survival it was evoked, and the rescue teams were able to identify and were able to really rescue them from while they were very close to the death. So yes, these factors, what we are witnessing now is very extraordinary. It's unprecedented factors what you are now
True.
witnessing.
And of course, you were talking of emotion, Dr. Jamil. That is why I highlighted these examples, because these are an example of emotions that connect people and bring people, together as well under very difficult circumstances, but nevertheless. I'd also like to understand the use of technology in order to help those in need. I'd like to give an example of Finder, which is a NASA spin-off technology, which is providing rescue teams with a tool to locate and aid those who are in need after the recent earthquake. Do you feel the use of technology in the 21st century has become important in order to help and aid people who are in need?
Well, this technology would further develop, and at the moment, NASA and other countries who have advanced in this technology are already helping Turkey out and using that, demonstrating how to use the technology. But in any future disaster of any kind, I think these technologies and the artificial intelligence would definitely be made best use of it. Even now, drones are being used, and all these detectors and devices are being used to identify the life under the rubble, and they have identified it. But more important is, they can identify the life under the rubble, and after 72 hours, it becomes very difficult. Those who survive, they of course, there's the will of God, but still, those people, they really showed their determination and showed the instinct, the way they could survive. But after 72 hours, if there is no water around them, they can remain without the food 7, 8 days, 9 days, 10 days, 20 days. But water becomes so. All those who would now be lucky enough to survive would be found that they had some water close by, or some bottle of water which they might be sipping until now. So the most important thing is, what are those devices and what are those technologies which could be brought in, and the rubbles and those lanterns and those beams and those columns could be cut across, and the people could reach to the, and then imagine, it's not the centuries old kind of disaster where you would have single stories or double stories building. Now it's multi-storied building, and if anything happens, people are buried under the rubbles of 20-storied and 30-storied buildings. So it becomes increasingly impossible to use the machinery of the kind which we normally envisage, like a bulldozer and cutter and a tractor, and those. In fact, it requires much more. And the modern world and modern
of course,
technology,
modern world and modern technology can be used to the benefit and for the benefit of the people who have been subject to such disasters. Challenges that emanate in Turkey and Syria. Emergency responders say the biggest challenge now is housing for those who have been left homeless. A massive tent making process is going on with all across Turkey, especially in the areas where the affectees are present in a majority. What are the other challenges you feel are going to be confronted by the people now in both Turkey and Syria?
Well, medical problems, people getting sick, people getting sick physically, and people getting sick mentally, the trauma under which they have gone, the job losses, the injured people, which are over 113,000 injured people, rehabilitation of those people. So far as the building infrastructure is concerned, with few $1 billion, yes, it would, the infrastructure, but then that would take time. Our Balakot and our earthquake affected area, still we are rebuilding it, after such a long time. So Turkey would also find that they would really have to spend a lot of time and a lot of money in it, and the world has to come for their rescue. UN OCHA, UN, they have also have launched an appeal. Let's see how it reveals. But the positive factor is that quite a few countries, as I said, 105 countries, they are participating as we are talking. So there is a hope. But Turkey is one of those countries. They have a resolve. They have the resilience to really fight it out. And the president of Turkey.
Okay. One last question, Ambassador Saab, one last question. The role of the humanitarian side of NATO, let's talk a little bit about that as well. 1,000 shipping containers plus are going to Turkey to help provide shelter for the earthquake survivors. How important is the humanitarian role of huge organizations such as NATO, such as United Nations, such as the SCO, such as the IOC? OIC rather. How important do you feel these organizations and the humanitarian side are in this day of tragedy that has struck Syria and Turkey?
All these organizations are known as the regional organizations, and these regional organizations are formed under the Chapter 8 of United Nations Charter. So they have the strength of collaboration and cooperation, and their goods, services, their relief, everything is facilitated, and all the countries are supposed to facilitate. Number one. Number two, these are the blocks like OIC. The first day this disaster was witnessed and it was happening, on your channels, the PTV News and PTV World, I mentioned about it, that how important it is for the regional organization, including SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, ECO, of which the Turkey is member, and NATO, of which the Turkey is member. NATO means all the Western allies and the United States, with the maximum wealth and maximum technology. So yes, OIC had the first responsibility in terms of their charter, and OIC has to gear up a little more, in my view.
Let's hope, Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan, that all these organizations, all these different countries gear up and accelerate their efforts as far as Turkey and Syria is concerned, specifically also Syria, because the complaints have been coming from the people in Syria that the aid is not reaching in time, or there's not enough aid that is reaching to them in time. So let's hope those efforts accelerate to both of these countries.
Let's hope the sanctions
maximum efforts. Pakistan is doing its maximum. That I can assure you, and I'm sure you would agree with me on that. Thank you very much, Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan Saab, to have talked to us about the latest updates as far as Turkey and Syria are concerned. Let's come to our last two story. The first concerns Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. A complete shutdown was observed today across the whole Indian illegally occupied valley. This call was given by the All Parties Hurriyat Conference. This was to highlight Narendra Modi's land grab policy that is meant to erase Kashmiri's identity and their Muslim character, and that is why this call was made, so that this issue could be highlighted. This is just one of the many issues that the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir valley is confronted with. But for this, today there was a whole shutdown that was done in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and different organizations also took processions in the Azad Jammu and Kashmir region to highlight that. Let's hope the world is listening and watching. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, 4 people have been killed in New Zealand. We were talking of disasters and earthquakes as well, but also in New Zealand, although not as devastating as what has happened in Syria and Turkey. But 4 people have been killed in New Zealand. Cyclone Gabriel struck the areas, as a result of which thousands have been left homeless as well. 4 people confirmed dead, thousands displaced in the country. This cyclone reached New Zealand on Sunday. It made its way down on the east coast of the North Island. It cut off entire towns, washed away farms, bridges, livestock, and inundated homes. Now, police said 4 people have now been confirmed, included a volunteer firefighter. Residents are being asked to conserve as much of water as possible, so that in the wake of emergency they could use that. More than 300 people have been rescued from the area, including 60 stranded on a single roof. Let's hope for the best for New Zealand. Our prayers, our hopes, just like our prayers and our hopes are going to the people in Syria and Turkey. They are also going for our brothers in New Zealand. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new stories and segments that pertain to us here in Pakistan. Allah Hafiz.